Right. Hello and welcome to the Rail Special Summer Series, curated by the Rail section editors. During the weeks of July 19th and 26th, we're celebrating the sections that make up the Brooklyn Rail, which you can find in print and on our website, free and accessible to all. Our conversations this week will celebrate the editorial diversity covered in the Rail here and in our virtual events. So I'm Jillian Jacob. I am the Rail's dance editor. I've been editing the dance section since 2016 and part of the Rail community for longer than that. I was a production assistant back when the headquarters were in Greenpoint, so a while ago. And one of my favorite aspects of editing the dance section is meeting the writers and the breadth of experience that they all bring, from young, new, emerging voices to seasoned and people who come from a dance background, a scholar background, art historical, theater. There's a wide range. And today I am more than delighted and honored to be joined by two of these writers, Siobhan Burke and Noa Weiss. Siobhan was writing and contributing to the Rail before my time and has stayed a beloved member of the community, introducing me to promising writers in her dance criticism class at Barnard, where Noa came and joined and has been enthusiastic and fresh new voice to the Rail's dance pages. Siobhan is a writer living in New York, although she's in Berlin right now for a little time away. And since 2013, she's been a dance critic for the New York Times, a contributing writer to Dance Magazine, and she's written for the Brooklyn Rail, Critical Correspondence, Cultured Open Space, The Village Voice, Art Forum, many, many others. She was a 2013 USC Annenberg Getty Arts Journalism Fellow and received 2018 Creative Capital Warhol Foundation Arts Writers Grant. And then Noa is a former student, as I've said, and I have lost the bio, so we will have to edit this part. I'm glad it is not live. Where did it go? I thought I copied it. Okay, here it is. Noa Weiss is a dancer, writer, and arts administrator based in New York City. He has performed works by Doug Verone, Bill T. Jones, Caroline Furman, many other choreographers, Lucinda Childs. And as an arts administrator, Noa's worked at the Joyce Theater, The Kitchen, Dance NYC, Jerome Robbins Dance Division, the New York Public Library, and Noa is a regular contributor to both Brooklyn Rail and Culture Pop. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. It's really great to come together. We send so many emails and work on the page and in our own reading and writing space, and to have these conversations and be part of the new social environment is a great way to bring the dance section to life. And it's also nice to reflect this past year where it was hard to write about dance. Dance was not happening. It was happening in new ways. We had to adapt quickly. We were isolated. And then reemerging is also difficult to feel back in the groove of being with other people, in venues, indoors and out. So I wanted to reflect and take a moment before we just continue to go on our experiences of the past year. To begin, if you can take yourself back to 2020, maybe the last things you saw, or when venues first closed, where did you look for dance, or where did you dance?
Noa, do you want to go first, or should I take this away? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I did was make an Instagram. I didn't have an Instagram before the pandemic, and I realized that like live stream dance classes, like, you know, everyone was moving towards that in order to like stay in touch with each other. I wasn't in New York City anymore. I got kicked out of the dorms. So I was like, how do I stay in touch with all the people that I follow and pay attention to?
Yeah. First, I just want to say, like, I'm so happy to be here with you all and with Noah in this new context. So yeah, it's just like a total delight. But thinking back to March 2020, the last thing I saw was actually River Dance at Radio City Music Hall, which is a show that has a special significance to me because I danced in the show, and I also, not last year, I danced in it like over 10 years ago, but I had written like a very personal essay about it, and took kind of a risk by like going to Radio City that night, and it felt sort of like epic and eerie and sort of like I shouldn't be here. And actually I went with students from the class I was teaching at the time at Barnard Dance in New York City. And it was just very strange to be in such a large venue that was so empty. It was such like an exuberant show. Yeah, it was just overall a very bizarre experience. So I'll never forget that. I think I was someone who really felt these like conflicting kind of like impulses when things started to shut down. One was like, as a journalist, I felt like, okay, I really need to cover what's going on in the dance world. I need to immediately start interviewing people and start making lists of like where you can watch dance online, and talk to people about like how they're coping right now. And so I felt this sort of pressure, this kind of like journalism pressure. But then I also, I guess on a more personal, like emotional level, I felt a real urge to just slow down and just really try to just take in what was happening. You know, that was like a really, really scary time. And yeah, I just remember feeling like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to produce anything. Like it felt like wrong to be like creating content, you know, during this like catastrophe. For some reason. And then eventually I found TikTok, which, no joke, was actually, well, I kind of felt, again, like a sort of professional responsibility to understand what was happening with dance on TikTok. I had previously kind of ignored it. I had created an account, but wasn't looking at it. And you know, I ended up getting pretty interested in both watching it and then also learning dances myself. Truly learning a TikTok dance, I think the first one I learned was Savage, was the happiest I'd felt in weeks. And I could go more into that if you want, but I really, really found joy learning TikTok dances for a little while. So yeah.
Yeah, and you wrote a brilliant piece, and I remember following some of the dances that you shared. And in the Rails pages, one contributor wrote about learning a Paula Abdul music video in their own living room. So I feel like there was definitely this moment of people dancing at home and in their living room and sharing it, before maybe the more polished professional virtual dance programs really started. There was kind of this looking to the experience of dancing, or to books or films or historical. There were some essays in the Rails section that took more historical dives than would in a normal year. But it's great to hear what kind of brought you joy and pulled you out of this uncertain and kind of paralyzed moment, which I think we were all feeling. And another, it's funny to think about these kind of like chapters of the pen. Now that I'm thinking like what stages we went through, but you know, after March, we kind of go further along into the spring, and there was this renewed Black Lives Matter protest and discussions about artists who were out of work, and just a lot of thinking about power structures and injustice, and many articles in the Rail, and you wrote in the Times and other places where took this pause as a way to think both about what dance, and you wrote a wonderful article, Siobhan, about dance in the streets during protests and what dance can serve social movements, as well as many writers thinking and artists thinking about injustices within the field, and what are the norms and structures that could be revised. There was the New Futures document and many other these kind of like brainstorming and rethinking the way things were. Do you have any thoughts in that realm? Either of you.
I think the pause was, yeah, a really kind of exciting moment for, I mean, just as you said, Jillian, like rethinking some of the, you know, entrenched and inequitable structures in the dance world. You know, the Creating New Futures document and group, that started really quickly. Like, I think it was by early May, they had already produced a draft of that document. And so it seemed to me that I don't know, artists were really like really ready to have those conversations, and almost as if there just hadn't been time before, you know, like, because everyone, I mean, this is sort of obvious now, but I remember at the time just this really exciting feeling of like, oh wow, there's actually time to reflect, for people to reflect and think about making like substantive change, because we're not just going and constantly, you know, getting to the next thing. But Noa, I wonder how it felt for you. Like, you were in school at that time, and I don't know, what were you noticing?
Yeah, I was in school, and then I was working remotely at Dance NYC over the summer. And I feel like, honestly, the biggest thing that I noticed was the Culture at Three calls, which are these big Zoom calls with just like a lot of very powerful people from arts organizations, like all getting together at the same time in the same like room and talking about like how to run an arts organization. And I feel like, yeah, there was a little bit of a sense of like we need to band together in a field where usually everything's very competitive and it's like, what's everyone else doing? So that was, I mean, I sort of observed that from afar because I wasn't running an arts organization. But those are still happening. And I think there was a feeling of like field solidarity. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I think that, you know, for me, like Jillian, you mentioned the piece I wrote about like dance in protest, and for a while, like for me, the most interesting dance was what was happening on the streets, and dance that was being, I don't know, that was really bound up with this like protest movement. And like, I don't know, like there was so much like virtual programming and stuff going on, which was great, you know, that people were finding all these new ways to adapt and, you know, create work for online. But yeah, when I wrote that story, I was just noticing like just tons and tons, like just expressions of resistance and joy through dance, like happening on the street. And, you know, I thought like, okay, I want to talk to like those dancers and I want to know what, like why they're dancing and what dance means to them. And so, you know, in a way that was a really hopeful moment. And I feel like all the dance that we were seeing at that time, because it was everywhere. Like I focused on sort of 3 main sort of videos that had gone viral, but you know, there were countless examples. There was so much dance in the streets. And where was I going with that thought? Gosh, I kind of lost my train of thought. Anyway, it was, oh yeah, it was just a hopeful moment. I remember of like coming sort of back together, you know, after this isolation. And in a way, I feel like the dance happening at that time was also really celebratory in some ways of just like the fact that people were coming together, you know, like physically coming together in protest. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely something that struck me, and you put it into words in a way, the reporting, that was, you know, something I had been just witnessing and not processing yet. A work that you both covered in different ways, moving forward in the timeline to the spring. I mean, there have been online programming, there have been films, there have been things that were happening outdoors, and but this one was Devynn Emery's Deadbird. And Siobhan, you did an interview, and Noa, you wrote an article for me for the dance section. And that touched upon grief and illness and bodies and moving and transition in a way that felt poignant to the current moment. There's so much of speaking to the moment, but these themes were really illuminated. And as you both, you know, thought through the work, I thought that might be a nice example of a work to discuss in this conversation.
Yeah, I just want to credit Siobhan because you covered MMM, the Women Memorial. I forget what the third M is. But I remember seeing that on Instagram and being like, oh my God, who is this person? And yeah, getting into Devynn's back catalog and just, I don't know, what a full-bodied artist. Like they just really don't leave any part of themselves behind when they come into dance. And I feel like that's, you know, how we were all engaging with dance. Like there was no way to leave behind like your baggage, what you're doing for work or what you ate for lunch, because it's all happening in the same space. And so, yeah, it felt like a portrait of what a lot of people were experiencing in different ways.
Do you want to give just an overview of the work? Hope you'll be able to share an excerpt at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, no summary can do it justice. Go watch the film whenever you can. But it's, so Devynn is a COVID nurse or a COVID hospice nurse, and they were working in the wards like throughout the pandemic. And this was a piece that they had been working on about kind of the intersections of their dancing and their nursing and kind of grief or like death transition medical work and spiritual work. And then COVID happened, and they got this residency, and they made a dance film with them interacting with a mannequin as sort of like a stand-in body for all of the bodies that they had been guiding through like illness and death. and there's a fake talk show. It's a funny piece also, which was so lovely to see. Yeah, I don't know, Siobhan, do you have other summary or description elements?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good description. And like, I guess I was also kind of surprised maybe by the humor in the film. And it's a mix of like humor and also, you know, it's also really mournful in the end, I found, and just incredibly poignant. I guess one other thing to mention about the whole project is that the film, which is called Deadbird, is a companion piece to a project called Can Anybody Help Me Hold This Body, which is a public grief altar where people, that devynn and altar tenders in the different cities where they presented the work would basically hold space, and people could come and make kind of grief offerings. And one thing that I really struck me from our interview was also how devynn described the grief altar, which was not only about, you know, grieving people who have passed, but also honoring, you know, yourself as a resilient living being. And so there's this kind of duality to it. And yeah, I think that the film and the altar really go hand in hand. And then there's an archive too on their website where people have uploaded like photographs of their offerings. So in a way, it kind of like lives on. And you can also make your own altar at home. So yeah, it was kind of like this multi-part and multi-city project that seems to have really brought people together in a beautiful way.
To move along in our calendar to this, a little later this spring when indoor venues were reopening. Noa, your essay or review or recount of the choreography of reopening and how the navigation of the COVID tests and the lines itself was performative and choreographic experience. And since then, I'm sure both of you have been, I mean, now we're in the summer months, it's beautiful to see dance outside, but this process of reopening, if you have any thoughts or new reflections about what that was, or if you just want to kind of speak through some of those examples, either of you.
Yeah, I saw this incredible meme that, so one of the really common like dance exercises is in, you know, like postmodern dance classes is like you all walk around the space and you try to like keep even distance between everyone. And so there's this meme that was like, some of you haven't been walking around the space trying to keep even distance, like, and it shows. And so that's, you know, it's kind of a joke, but when we're coming into venues with really heavy safety protocols, like it's a lot of movement rule following. It's a lot of like the staff being trained on how to shepherd people or like think about how bodies move through space. And I was like, oh, this is just choreography. I can be like a college student about it. But also I'm already seeing like the rule following or the kind of deference that people were feeling or showing physically early in the pandemic of like, oh, just tell me where to stand and I'll go stand there, has really gone out the window. It's just like kind of the low level anarchy of human behavior is coming back, where it's like you don't know where someone's going to walk or if they're going to get near you. So that's an odd transition, moving indoors with people who aren't paying as close attention to where they're moving all the time.
Yeah, no, I really appreciated your piece about the choreography of COVID protocols. I just thought it was right on. And we saw one of the same shows. We both saw Social at the Armory. And I was glad that you gave like I felt like I didn't do this in my piece, which was like I wrote like a pretty like disgruntled piece, and like I did not have a good experience at that event. I just like didn't, even though there were great things about it, but like overall it didn't work for me. So, but I appreciated that you appreciated in your piece the kind of complexity of those protocols, because it really was like an administrative feat. And I guess I had a little moment of regret of not kind of like acknowledging that, like all the staff, it just took a lot of organization, you know, and it was very smooth. It all ran very smoothly. But for me, part of the problem was just like this sense of like that everything was so controlled. And there was a lot of friction for me between that just like hyper control and almost like coddling of us as audience members. And then this expectation to kind of like let go, you know, and like have a great time, like in your 6-foot radius. I was just like, yeah, those like really, really clashed for me.
Yeah, and I think most people don't go to dance shows to watch the administration of the show. Like that's a pretty niche like form of amusement.
I don't know if you, oh, go ahead.
You know, I feel like you were in awe and admired the logistical feat, but it was kind of like, and the whole show happened before the show happened. And my sense from your writing was there was an underwhelming aspect to what was meant to be the performance. Yeah. And yeah, because you wrote about the Armory and then Guggenheim and New York Live Arts and how they were each different. I mean, each work was different, each approach was different. Were there any other works that stood out to you? Another topic I want to discuss is shifts to your own writing practice. But before we move there, if I don't want to move too fast from reflecting on specific works, either in this reopening or previously, if any online works that spoke to you. I know we spoke about the more organic dance that was happening in public space.
You know, as much as I felt some resistance to like, I did feel some resistance to watching dance online for sure. Because I felt like one of the things that I have always like that's meaningful to me about live performance is the liveness of it, and that like energetic exchange with the performers, and the way that you have to be in the moment, you know, and like more as, you know, the years have gone on and like I've gotten like more and more like attached to my phone, like that time I feel like in the theater, you know, just with the work has become like more and more precious. So yeah, it was hard for me to like watch stuff on screens and not feel like a little depressed, but there have been some really amazing short films that like have come out. You know, there was a series at the Onassis, I think they're called the Onassis Center. I think it's the Onassis Center, but or Onassis Foundation maybe, they produce a series of short films like right when COVID started. They were these kind of micro commissions. And I think artists had some sort of like limited time period to create a work in. And there were a few, what I thought were just like really compelling pieces to come out of that really, when I look back at them now, they capture that really unusual moment of early in the pandemic. There's one by Okwui, Okpokwasili called, can't remember the title off the top of my head, but There's another one by this choreographer who's based in Berlin, Válastur. It's called Slothian Days, about kind of dancers like adjusting to this new tempo, this new slow tempo. So there are some works in that series that I feel really capture that moment, that very specific moment. Those are just a few that come to mind. And then, you know, more recently with reopening, like, you know, I've seen some interesting things. Like the Chocolate Factory had a like a closing slash opening celebration. They're leaving their old theater and moving to a new theater. And like, I feel like for me, as much as the work itself right now, like the social aspect of being out is very interesting. And I just feel this kind of like strange, kind of like drifting or floating sensation of like not totally knowing what's happening. I don't know if that resonates with it. I know it's really vague. No, does that resonate? I've seen you at a couple things. Am I crazy? Do you know what I'm talking about?
There's a level of, I feel like we've had to upend like how we do dance performance so many times, from like, we're not going to do any dance performance to like make a show on Zoom to like make a dance film. And so now that we're like kind of returning back to something that we all think we know how to do, we're like, is someone going to change the script on us? Like the doors feel open for people to run performances in different ways. But also kind of like the point of my like returning to venues thing is like, just give me the structure that works. It's so comforting and lovely and I miss it. And that's, you know, like the pleasure of going to a venue is walking in and being like, I know what's about to happen. And I'm excited to see what people will do with the structure that's given. Yeah, definitely the floaty feeling is there.
And the July-August issue just dropped, in which Noa, you wrote about the River to River Festival and Okpui's procession, among other processions and performances, and slowing down as a theme. But I think, Siobhan, you mentioned running into each other there, and that experience of walking as part of the work. I'm curious to hear both of your thoughts more on that.
Well, basically, well, Noa, you described it really well in your piece. Like, it was a slow walk towards the water across this lawn that, like, if you were walking at a normal pace, it would have taken you like 30 seconds, maybe. But Okwui invited us to walk like really, really, really slowly. For me, it was actually really welcome experience because in a way, the pace of coming back, like sort of like reintegrating into quote unquote normal life, even though it's not normal, like the pace has been a little overwhelming, or sometimes it felt a little too fast, or like I can't quite keep up, you know? And I felt like I really needed that slowness at that time. But this is kind of silly, but I found it was really, really hard on my body. Like I found that it really hurt. And the next day I was sore and I was like, oh, wow, like that was actually a huge effort. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so strenuous. Okwui, I was first introduced to her work because she made a piece at Barnard my freshman year, and I have friends who were in that piece who would, you know, rehearsals from 6 to 9 p.m. They were, you know, they're dance students. They're like, we're dancing in a piece, and Okwui was having them walk like slowly, and they were like going crazy. And it's so difficult. But I don't know, I think physically I'm a big fan of the just do something really hard for a really long time because then you can't think about anything else. There's something really meditative about that. But I found it so emotionally hard um, as I read in the piece because I got left behind. Like the whole, it's supposed to be this like big communal experience, but doing something physically very difficult, and by the way, like also something that we're not used to, slowing down as a group is like almost impossible. So yeah, I felt a lot of things. I don't know, River to River always makes me feel a lot of things. It like catches me at a, is it cancer season? Like who knows?
Yeah, I mean, just being there, I remember how like, you know, most of us got to the water, and then I was talking to some people, and then I saw you, and I remember you saying like, you know, like I wasn't done, you know, like, and I was just like, wow, like how how did you do that? So, yeah, but it's really interesting though. Like I feel like it's an interesting problem because the instructions were to go as slow as the slowest person, you know? And then I guess it's a question of what would happen if we really did that? And then why didn't people? And also, or I feel like you kind of get to a place in the piece where you are sort of thinking like, maybe, I don't know, like you say
Maybe
that
it's my fault.
you failed. Yeah, like maybe it's your fault. But I don't know, it's just a very interesting like communal experiment for sure.
Yeah, I feel like that's so much of like the experimental dance that I've like seen and been a part of is just like experimenting with how to be with a group of people. And a lot of times there are these, you know, rule scores, and the thesis always is like, it doesn't really matter what the rules are, it matters what the people do. Um, and that's, I think that's not necessarily something that Okwui could have like communicated to us because it's a lesson you have to learn by doing it. But it feels very in line with, I don't know, like her artistic vision and message and trajectory.
It's always interesting when there's writing about these more improvisational or more score-based works that are about directions, but it's shaped by the audience, and it can't be the straightforward review of this is the work, and every time it's going to be performed, it's going to be, obviously it'll be different because each dancer performing a work is different, live performance is different, but not in the same way where like it really could be a completely different experience. So I'm always fascinated the more personal perspective that writers bring to communicating an experience and you know, having some evaluation and analysis, but it is a challenge in the writing process. It's a different animal than work on a proscenium where the lights go down. And I'm wanted to hear a bit just about your reflections on your own writing processes this past year. Any thoughts you have about the general landscape of dance criticism, what lasting changes there might be, what you would like to see, maybe what space the Rail can offer as a venue for dance criticism. Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah, in some ways it's been a really challenging year to be a dance critic, but in other ways, I mean, personally, I feel very fortunate that I've continued to have opportunities to write. You know, even though there aren't the usual like events, you know, going on like to write about in the ways that I'm used to, I guess, like there's certainly been no shortage of things to write about because artists haven't stopped making work. And, you know, as we were talking about before, they also haven't stopped having like really important conversations about just the like structures of the field. So yeah, in a way, I feel like I've been challenged to be a little more creative in my approach, you know, finding stories in different ways, things that aren't necessarily just tied to like an event that's happening at this time, you know, but like trying more to notice like patterns or trends, like people dancing outdoors in the winter. I did a piece about that, you know, realizing that like, oh, wow, there are still people who are like having full-on ballet class outside, like in the dead of winter. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pause and I'll let Noah, yeah, go.
Yeah, I think mostly looking at the pieces that I've written for the Rail, like the first thing I wrote a couple years ago was this like moral outrage. I was like, people need to know, like I have a critique. And that used to be, I don't know, I thought that that was kind of what the shape that my dance criticism was going to take, because it's an easy thing for me. And now it feels really cruel to look at anyone who's making dance under these circumstances and criticize them, because like, you know, things have always been dire. It's always been very difficult to like make a dance and pay people for it. But everyone's really fighting the odds right now. And so, you know, that's like the social distance dance party, or things where I'm starting to look more at the structures that allow dances to happen and all of the things that people have to do behind the scenes to make their work. I just feel a level of, I don't know, kind of like awe and congratulations. And so attending work with that kind of respect and deference feels like it's going to last, at least in my writing.
I think also like, yeah, Noah, you're saying that people are really fighting the odds right now. And for me, that's been a bit of a like, I suppose, yeah, ethical conundrum as a critic this year. And in some ways it always is because dance is such an under-resourced field. But like, for example, like I was assigned to review the American Ballet Theater Fall Gala, which was like dance films by 4 choreographers. And, you know, it just was like, these are all experienced choreographers, but their experiences with making work for like proscenium stages primarily. And, you know, they were really working in like a completely new medium. So it's like, I felt like I couldn't really evaluate the films as films because they are not filmmakers. And I didn't get the sense that, except for one person, that the artists really had the opportunity to get a really in-depth collaboration with the film director. So yeah, in terms of like reviewing like virtual dance, I've definitely felt a little like hesitant about that this whole year, and more just wanting to focus on when I see something that's like really successful, like wanting to tell people about it, but not necessarily like take things down if they're not working, because really everyone's like learning a whole new skill set, you know, that some people spent their whole lives like learning how to do. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any topics that are on your mind that we haven't touched upon yet? not.
I mean, there's so much.
Conversation will continue in the Rails dance section, but it is always nice to take a moment to think about the writing process and the field of criticism, and the work that we all do. It's so special to work with so many different writers and to look back in the Rails archive of the dance section. I know when you were writing, Siobhan, Claudia LaRocco was the dance editor, and there were many special issues in that time period. I look back at the lineage of dance editors and look back at the archive of articles and learn so much. It's like a document of dance history in real time in a way. And really the range of voices, we're always engaging new writers in different ways and hosting conversations, whether for print or in this realm. Deborah Jowett contributed at one point, and she must have been the oldest and most seasoned of voices that we've hosted in her mid-80s, late 80s. I'm not sure. It was a few years ago at this point. It was with another writer that you pointed my way from your course, Sariel. Frankfurter, and a former professor of mine, Claire Croft, and Deborah Jowett all wrote about Pina Bausch from generational perspectives. And that was a treat. And I look forward to all the work that we will share in times to come.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do I get to ask Noa a question?
You get to ask any questions you would like.
Okay. Well, I will say that I attended Noa's thesis reading, which was great. And I asked like sort of an annoying question, which I asked Noa to define the word vibe. And I just want to like publicly say that, no, I'm sorry if that was an annoying question.
No, okay, this is such a moment of redemption for me because this is like a shower thought where I think about the time you asked me what a vibe was, and I feel like I answered it wrong because I didn't take time to understand the question. Because I think, let's see, how do I do quick context? But you were asking, I two pieces of performance art, and I was like, I got a trans vibe from these. And Siobhan was like, what determines a vibe? Like, is it, the audience that it speaks to? Is it like any of these things? And I didn't really answer. But I think my answer now, I guess, would be that oh no. I feel like it's the thing that I was speaking to was specifically related to my thesis. Like it was a trans vibe. It was a thing that spoke to a specific audience, and not necessarily something that the artists were doing themselves. And yeah, I think that's I don't know. Has there been a lot of vibe discourse? I feel like the word vibe just floats around. But it does feel like kind of a people's understanding, instead of like an artist specifically tries to give off this energy and they succeed or don't succeed.
Yeah, well, for the record, I thought the answer you gave at the time also made sense, and that what you just said makes sense too. So,
No,
yeah,
I'm so sorry to jump in like this, but I feel like I love, I'm so sorry to jump in like this, but I feel like usually I think of vibes as like atmospheric or affective, but I love this idea of the vibe as relational.
Mm-hmm.
Or like the vibe is like reciprocity, or like the vibe is something that has to do with the entanglements of who is sitting in the room and what gestures they're enacting in that space together. I just feel like that's a very beautiful place the two of you stumbled on in this Zoom space.
Thank No, do not apologize for your contribution. I thought you were going to say, and we have to finish the conversation because time's up. The fact that you were so moved to join that discussion is, thank you.
Yeah, I'm here for the vibes discourse.
Yeah, and I think dance writers in particular trying to describe something that is hard to put into words and maybe defies definition or like concrete boundaries. That's the work of the writer, the dance critic. But now I'm expecting essay that I will commission on what is a vibe.
There's an essay I've been meaning to send you, Noah, about vibes. So this is a good reminder because yeah, there's a newsletter I subscribe to that there was like a whole edition about vibes. And I guess I just not to belabor the subject, but like I really did think it was like a rich thing, like a rich moment in your presentation. And so, but then I like worried that like maybe you thought I wasn't taking your work seriously because there was so much in it. But I think that this conversation here shows that vibes discourse can be very rich and profound. So
yeah, I can catch our anthology in 3 years.
yeah.
Vibes with just like little tildes on the sides.
But I don't know, are we out of time or I actually had another question, or
Go
can we?
for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just so happy that you've like continued writing about dance, and like I was wondering like why you have decided to do that. Like, yeah, why do you like writing about dance, or why are you drawn to it? Because you're also you're an artist yourself, you're a dancer and choreographer, so I feel like a lot of people who are serious dancers and choreographers like often just like gravitate into like making work and performing, and it seems like you are like doing all these things at once. So I just wondered what drew you to continue to write about dance.
Yeah, I think this is actually, I wrote down a question for you. So these, I'm going to try and make them dovetail. But I think I spend a lot of time thinking about archiving and how, how to gather traces of something inherently ephemeral like dance. And the way, that I mostly interact with dance is through the pieces kind of left behind. Like I see a fair amount of live performance, but mostly my engagement is like research and like picking up pieces. And so that's something that I think is so important for like the next person like me who's hears like, oh, devynn Emery, who is that? And then they have a chance to go read a personal account, which is, in my opinion, like the closest thing you can get to the experience of the actual show. So I try. It's mostly I care a lot about dance performance, and I want to give back to it in some way. And it's a lot of fun. I share my opinions with all my friends anyway, so I may as well like not bother them with that. But I wanted to ask you because this is my kind of take is archiving is a main method, but also in the digital like dance, everyone's gotten really good at videography all of a sudden. Archiving isn't as necessary by some standards. So where do you think that leaves dance criticism? I mean, this is the question that you ask at the beginning of your class, but like, what is dance criticism? What can it be? What should it be? What is it for you right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess great questions. And for me, I feel like in some ways, like what you're saying about archiving definitely resonates with me, and I think that's one thing that drew me to dance criticism when I started was the idea of creating a record, and not like a definitive record or anything that's intended to be like the only record, but just one, you know, record. And I think that what it is for me, like when I think of the actual process of writing, and it's like can be so challenging. And when I think about like why do I keep doing this, like it is like a creative act, and I think that I am really drawn to the tension between I mean, it sounds like sort of a cliche, but like just the ephemerality of dance, and the elusiveness, you know, and the ambiguity, and the kind of way that you can't really pin it down, the tension between that and then sort of like the like relative concreteness of the written word. So this challenge of like trying to somehow communicate something that has happened in a medium that almost feels like oppositional or something. That kind of like contradiction, I think, is just really, yeah, for me, it's just kind of like a creative, it's just creatively interesting. And I feel like I wouldn't still be doing it if I didn't get some sort of creative satisfaction out of it, you know? And yeah, does that make sense? I'm sure there are other, I know there's so much more to say about that, but that's what comes to mind right now. Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to speak, and I hope to continue the conversation. And at the Rail, we have a tradition of ending all of our community events with a poetry reading, also our lunches and many gatherings. So I'm thrilled to welcome back our very own Malvika Jolly to be the Poet Laureate of the day and to close us out with a poem.
Thank you so much, Gillian. This is a beautiful, it feels like a beautiful reciprocity and a role reversal. And I'm so happy to be on this side of the Zoom. And thank you to the both of you for this beautiful conversation. It's been such a delight to be here as a passenger in the well-driven car. Now I understand. So I have really enjoyed in this conversation the discussions of like dance, but also dance protest and kind of physicality of the body or gesturality. Gillian, there was, so last year, I think in the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a piece that you commissioned or curated and published on Trisha Brown's Roof piece from '71 and how Anhita Razmi sort of restaged it in the thick of the pandemic, but in Tehran on rooftops. And I feel like that's really coming to mind for me, like how the physical gesture, the gesture of the body, can carry with it a kind of protest politics, and opens up so many discussions of like exactly what everyone was saying. What is dance criticism? What is dance when we are sort of living through the collapse of public space or publics or like inessential gestures? So I'm going to read a poem by the poet Ginha Johari. She's a Lebanese American writer. She lives in New York, and this is a poem that she actually wrote specifically for us at the Rail, which we were so lucky to have. The name of the poem is "I Translate the Names of Boys Killed in Gaza," and it too is kind of inspired by a gestural image, a politics, and a dance of the body. So it's inspired by this image of this iconic image of the boy with the stone in his hand. It's this young boy, Faris Odeh. He was this young boy behind this like iconic photojournalistic moment in the early 2000s in Israel, Palestine. And, kind of in the tradition of like Napalm Girl in the Vietnam War, he's sort of photographed standing alone in front of an Israeli Defense Force tank during the Second Intifada, and he's holding the stone in his hand, getting ready. And, sadly, he was killed just a few moments after the photograph was taken. So she sort of takes that as a kind of guiding image, an image system, that gesture, to kind of extrapolate the image further. And if it's okay, I'll kind of, this is the image. Hold on. Let's see. These are the images. Can you kind of see that? So it becomes this kind of iconic protest image, but essentially it's a gesture. And I found that very beautiful. So I'll read the poem. Thank you so much for having me. So, Ginha Johari, I translate the names of boys killed in Gaza. In the city of poets, there is a boy with a stone. He is the guardian, lion-hearted and small, the stone half of his palm half of mine, the land scorched by naked sun, the blue of the sky lightens his eyes. In the city of poets, there is a boy with a stone. We call him Haider, which means lion, which means brave. We call him Khadir, which means goodness. We call him Ahmed, which means commendable. We call him Rashad, which means good judgment. In the city of poets, the boy with the stone can visit his family in El-Quds, which means Jerusalem. He picks oranges and lemons with his grandfather on an orchard as long as his small boy body can see. He fills a basket with orange fruit for his mother. He doesn't drop the stone. We call him Riyadh, which means gardens. We call him Siraj, which means light. We call him Mazen, which means cloud. We call him Sa'ad, which means happiness. We call him Basim, which means the one who smiles. He is always smiling. On his shoulders, he holds his sister up to a branch she can't reach, and they both fall, laughing, to the soft red earth that's known them and fed them in every past life. He leads her back home, where their mother bakes bread. He holds her hand. He doesn't drop the stone. We call him Mehdi, which means rightly, guided. We call him Amir, which means prince. We call him Allah, which means nobility. We call him Suleiman, which means man of peace. We call him Mustafa, which means chosen one. In the city of poets, there is a boy with a stone. At school, he memorizes verses from Darwish Sami, Al-Qasim, Fadwa Tukan. Midday, outside, the sun overhead warms his small body as he kicks a ball to other small boys like him. In each of their hands, there is a stone. We call him Hani, which means carefree and happy. We call him Tariq, which means morning star. We call him Salah, which means peace. We call him Baha, which means brilliance. We call him Marwan, which means stone. In the city of poets, the boy sleeps in a bedroom with his brother. On the walls there are posters of soccer players and musicians. His parents smoke and laugh downstairs with their neighbors. Outside, the only noises are from crickets. The carpet of stars above them lights the angles of his brother's face, his future face. Even in sleep, they don't drop the stone. We call him Salim, which means safe and secure. We call him Hazem, which means determined. We call him Allah, which means nobility. We call him Omar, which means long-lived. We call him Khalid, which means endless, eternal. In the city of poets, a tank waits for him, an army behind, flanked by a police brigade, glazed in impenetrable armor. Over his home, the deafening whine of an airstrike. The boy will wake on this day, his stone in hand, his hand clutched like a heart at the moment of flight, our guardian. And we will call him Shahid, which means martyr. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I don't want to add more words. I want to end there. But thank you, each of you, for joining the conversation. I'm really honored. And I thank you for everyone watching on the YouTube channel. And please visit the Rails event page to view other conversations this week and in the future at brooklynrail.org/events. Until the next conversation.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you.
And Malvika and Noah.
Yeah, thank you all so
Thank
much.
you.
This was so much fun.
Thank you, Rail. Thank you, Rail Dance Section, for existing and continuing to exist.
Yes, that's the hope, and being stronger.
Yes.
With all the support we can garner. Yes.
I thought this was a beautiful conversation, and to all of those who are watching at home or abroad or wherever your laptop takes you, like, love and courage. Thank you for having us. Bye, guys. Should we stop the recording?
Yeah.